Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking into a technology that's really becoming quite integrated into healthcare, RFID.
That's right, radio frequency identification.
And we've got this 2025 market report. Looks pretty detailed. It gives us a global view of where RFID stands now in healthcare and maybe more importantly, where it's going.
Exactly. This deep dive, it's really about getting under the hood of the current market
Yeah.
and, looking at the projections for growth. Our goal here is to pull out the key stuff, what's pushing adoption and what changes we should probably expect.
Okay. And our main source is this global report on RFID in healthcare. It came out in March 2025 from Cognitive Market Research. So let's dive in. Maybe start with the big picture. Like, how big is this market right now, and what are we looking at in terms of growth?
Okay, so just set the scene quickly. RFID, think of it like electronic tags, little things you attach to objects or even people.
Right.
And they send out radio signals that scanners can pick up. So automatic identification, tracking, that kind of thing. Now, the report says for 2025, the global market size is sitting around 400 and 151.5 million US dollars.
Okay, just over $4 billion.
But here's where it gets interesting. By 2033, they're projecting it'll jump to,
Yeah.
wait for it, USD 141.80 million.
Wow, that's a huge leap, 16 billion.
Over 16 billion, yeah. That's not just steady growth, that's pretty explosive.
So what does that break down to, like year over year?
Well, it works out to a compound annual growth rate, a CAGR, of 18.50%. That's between 2025 and 2033.
18.5%.
Yeah. And, CAGR is like the average smoothed out growth each year over that period. It's also worth noting the calculations use 2024 as the base year, and they look at historical data from 2021 up to 2024.
An 18.5% CAGR. I mean, that really underlines the momentum here. So what's fueling this? What are the main drivers?
The report highlights a few key things. One big one is the growing need for real-time patient tracking and monitoring.
Correct.
Think about a busy hospital, right? Knowing precisely where patients are, especially during emergencies or complex procedures, it just boosts efficiency, response times.
Yeah, I can see that. In an emergency, finding someone fast is critical.
Life-saving, potentially.
And I guess that ties into another big area, managing all the stuff in a hospital, inventory, equipment.
Exactly. The demand for better inventory and asset management is another major driver. We're talking everything from expensive scanners and pumps down to everyday supplies. Knowing where things are if they need maintenance when you're low on stock, it cuts costs, sure, but critically it means the right tool is there when it's needed.
Avoids the situations where you can't find that vital piece of equipment.
Right. And the third big driver, it's the increasing focus on patient safety, specifically reducing medication errors.
Ah, okay. How does RFID help there?
Well, it can verify the 5 rights, right patient, right drug, right dose, right route, right time. It acts like a digital double check.
Those are definitely strong reasons for adoption. But, are there any roadblocks? Think that might slow this down a bit.
Yeah, the report does mention a couple of potential limiting factors. One is the initial cost.
Ah, the investment.
Right, the upfront investment for the readers, the tags, the software, integrating it all.
Yeah.
It can be pretty significant, especially, for smaller clinics or hospitals with tighter budgets.
It's a whole system, not just buying a few tags.
Exactly. And the other potential issue is interference and also a lack of standardization across different RFID systems.
Interference, like signals getting crossed.
Yeah, potentially if you have multiple systems operating close together, and if different vendor systems don't talk to each other easily because standards aren't universal, that can hinder wider seamless adoption.
Okay, so cost and potential tech hurdles. Makes sense. So looking ahead then, what are some of the newer trends? How else is RFID being used?
Well, one really interesting trend is tracking surgical instruments and equipment.
Oh.
Yeah, so you improve accountability, make sure nothing gets misplaced, or worse, left behind. But it also really helps streamline the whole sterilization and management process for those instruments. Think about the turnover in an OR.
Huge efficiency gain there, I imagine.
Definitely. And another trend, we sort of touched on it with patient safety, is the wider use of RFID wristbands for patient ID.
Right, the wristbands.
Yeah, they're just much more reliable than, say, just reading a printed band. Reduces errors in giving meds or treatments. Plus, you can potentially store key info right on the tag, easily scanned.
So better safety, better efficiency. Let's shift to the geography now. You mentioned North America is the biggest market currently.
That's right. For 2025, the estimate is North America holds about 37% of the global market.
Hmm.
That's around $1,536 million.
Okay, 1.5 billion.
And it's still growing strong, projected CAGR of 16.8% through 2033. Probably down to, advanced healthcare systems, early tech adoption.
And the U.S. is the giant within that.
Absolutely. The U.S. market alone is estimated at 211.95 million for 2025. CAGR around 16.6%. Canada and Mexico are next, about 184 million and 140 million respectively. Interestingly, their KGRs are slightly higher, 17.6% for Canada, 17.3% for Mexico, maybe catching up faster.
Interesting. What about Europe? How does it stack up?
Europe's a big player too, holds about 29% of the market in 2025. That's just over $1.2 billion.
Okay.
And its growth rate, the KGR, is projected at 17.4%. So
Yeah.
also very healthy growth. Reflects that push across Europe for, modernizing healthcare.
Which countries are leading in Europe?
Germany has the largest slice right now, around $238 million, growing at 17.6%.
Right.
The UK is close behind, about $202 million, but actually has a slightly higher projected growth rate, 18.2%.
Okay.
Then you've got Russia, France, Italy as substantial markets too. One interesting smaller one is Luxembourg, only about 14.5 million market size, but a strong projected KGR of 17.7%.
So solid growth across the board there. Now, I remember reading something about Asia Pacific, potentially the fastest growth.
You got it.
Yeah, that key finding.
APAC holds roughly 24% of the market share in 2025. That's nearly $1 billion and 996 million.
Right.
But its projected TGR from 2025 to 2033, a massive 21.5%.
Wow, 21.5. That's significantly higher than North America or Europe.
By quite a margin. Yeah, it really makes it the region to watch for rapid expansion, probably driven by, big investments in healthcare infrastructure, technology adoption, catching up fast.
And which countries are powering that in APAC?
China is the biggest market
Yeah.
currently, around 418 million, with a strong 21% TGR.
With India?
India actually has the highest national CGR forecast at 23.4%.
23.4.
Yeah, even though its 2025 market size is smaller, about 100 million. Shows really dynamic growth potential there.
Okay.
And you also see strong growth across Southeast Asia, generally, Singapore, Taiwan, Australia, South Korea, Japan, all showing KGRs around 20 to 22%.
Fascinating. That regional difference is really stark.
What
About the other regions? South America, Middle East, Africa, they're smaller pieces of the pie, I assume.
They are, yeah. South America is about 4% of the global market,
Oh.
around $158 million in 2025, but still growing quite fast. CGR of 19.3%.
19% is still very strong growth.
Absolutely. And within South America, Argentina actually shows the highest regional TGR forecast at 20.2%. Brazil is the largest market, though.
Okay. Middle East?
Also around 4% market share, but $166 million. And again, a strong TGR at 19.9%. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are showing particularly high growth rates there, over 20%. Turkey, too.
In Africa.
Africa has the smallest share currently, about 2.2%, roughly $91 million, but still a very respectable projected TGR of 18.8%. South Africa leads the way there, with the highest regional TGR at almost 20%.
Okay, so it's clear growth is global,
Right.
but let's say the acceleration varies quite a bit. APAC really stands out. Now let's dig into the tech itself. The report mentioned passive versus active tags. What's the difference, and which one's more common in healthcare?
Right, so passive tags are currently the dominant type. They're generally cheaper, simpler. They don't have their own battery. They get power from the RFID reader's signal when it scans them. Think of like those security tags on clothes.
Right.
Because they're cost-effective, they're used widely for things like, patient tracking, medication management, basic asset monitoring, lots of applications.
Okay, so passive is dominant, but you said active tags are the fastest growing segment.
Yes, exactly. Active tags were different. They have their own battery inside.
Ah, so they broadcast their own signal.
Precisely. They actively transmit data, often over longer ranges than passive tags. And they can sometimes store more info, too. This makes them really good for real-time location tracking of high-value assets, maybe tracking patient movements continuously within a facility, or in emergency response scenarios where you need instant, precise location.
So more capability, but presumably more expensive.
Generally, yes. More complex, need battery replacements eventually. But for certain critical applications, that real-time capability is worth it.
Makes sense. So you have these two types of tags solving different needs. What about the other bits of the system? Components?
Yeah, the report looks at the whole system.
Huh?
the tags themselves, obviously. Then you need readers to, send and receive the signals. Antennas are part of that. Inside the tags are the integrated circuits, the ICs, the sort of brains. And then critically, there's the software.
Software to manage it all.
Right, to collect, interpret, and make sense of all the data coming from the readers.
And in terms of market share for these components.
The tags themselves are the biggest segment right now. I mean, you need lots of tags for any system.
Hey, naturally.
But the fastest growing segment is the RFID software.
Ah, interesting. Why is that?
Well, as adoption grows, the need for more sophisticated software grows too. Think about data analytics, turning all that tracking data into useful insights. Also, cloud-based systems, being able to access tracking info from anywhere. And crucially, integrating the RFID data smoothly with existing hospital management systems, like the EHR. That integration piece is huge.
So the intelligence layer is where a lot of the growth and value is happening now.
You could say that, yeah. The hardware enables it, but the software unlocks a lot of the potential.
Okay. And finally, what about the companies involved? Who are the big players in this space?
It's a pretty competitive market, as you expect with this kind of growth. The report calls out companies like Zebra Technologies, Impinj, and Honeywell International as some of the leaders.
Familiar names in tracking and logistics tech.
Exactly. And they're not standing still. They're integrating things like IoT, Internet of Things capabilities, AI, into their RFID solutions to make them smarter and more powerful.
And didn't the report mention a specific example in Brazil?
It did, yeah. Good catch. In November 2024, the Instituto do Coração do Brazil, a heart institute, they implemented Zebra's RFID tech for asset management.
Okay.
Helped them track critical medical gear in real time. The report notes it improved their operational efficiency, made sure equipment was where it needed to be. A practical example of the benefits.
That really brings it home. And there was also a mention of some tech developments earlier in 2024.
Yeah, briefly, it noted that in March 2024, companies like HID Global, ST Microelectronics, Janum Technologies, they announced some advances, things focused on better interoperability between systems, boosting security features, improving the accuracy of real-time tracking, the kind of ongoing innovation that keeps pushing the technology forward.
So constant improvement happening. Okay, let's try and wrap this up then. Based on this 2025 report, the big picture for RFID in healthcare is, well, significant growth ahead.
Definitely. Substantial growth globally.
Driven mainly by the need for better efficiency, improved patient safety, and just managing assets more effectively.
Those are the key drivers, yes.
Regionally, North America is the largest market now, but Asia-Pacific is set for the fastest expansion by quite a margin.
That's a major takeaway, the APAC growth rate.
And looking at the tech itself, while passive tags are common now, the active tags, and especially the software layer, the analytics, the integration, that's where a lot of the momentum and future development seems to be.
Exactly. Active tags for real-time needs and smarter software to make it all work seamlessly. It's a dynamic market. You've got established players innovating, new applications emerging, all focused on making healthcare work better.
It's been really illuminating diving into this report. You see how intertwined healthcare and this kind of tracking tech are becoming. It does make you wonder, though, looking ahead, say, 10 years, what other uses for RFID might top up in healthcare beyond just tracking stuff and people?
That's a great question.
And, as we connect more and more devices and gather all this data, how do we make sure patient privacy and data security keep pace? That feels like a huge ongoing challenge.
It absolutely is. Definitely something to keep thinking about.
Well, that's certainly food for thought. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.